Sure. Welcome back, everyone. Thank you very much. So if you haven't already, please do grab some more water. So we're going to take the next item as is on the agenda. So that's the self-storage units with 9 new apartments. Tim, please open up the item, please.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, here we can see the site outlined in red. Morden Hall Park over to the right, Morden Road leading up to South Wimbledon, adjacent to the site here. Morden Town Centre being roughly over here within a couple of 100 meters. Again, you can see the layout of the existing site. So previously used as a car showroom, a large showroom building with cars displayed on the forecourt outside and a large dropped curb along the frontage. Here you can see the existing buildings on site. So this is a view from the frontage from the road with existing residential properties on that side. And then also residential properties on this side. Here are some section drawings. Just to take you around the site, this is the frontage, no longer in use as a car showroom, recently vacated. It has now been secured, the site, as there was a gypsy incursion a few weeks ago. And here you can see the site enclosed there. A view from inside the site looking up towards South Wimbledon and the existing properties separated by an access road. Again, looking across to the site, you can actually see the building we're in here, looking across to the rear of properties on Daybrook Road. This is looking in from the north, so looking at the side of the existing building here. And again, this is a similar position, but looking back towards the main road. So the site is actually over here. This is the other side of the site, looking at the adjoining residential buildings further to the south. And again, Daybrook Road properties to the rear. This is the alleyway that separates these residential properties from the site, and new development at the back. And again, another view there. Oh, some of the same photos in. This is a view from the upper levels of one of the properties on Daybrook Road. So you can see the existing building here and the open section here. Some of the properties have outbuildings at the back, not all of them. This section over here, whilst I appreciate it's hard to make out, it's a lot of ivy growth over the existing rear wall of the building. And then you can see it's further along there. And this is what the site looked like previously, not too long ago. Moving on to the proposal, and that's at page 223. It is for a self-storage building to the north and a standalone residential block of 9 flats. The application has been amended in response to officer comments to pull the building line away from the properties here. The existing building goes up to the boundary here and finishes at a high point, whereas over here it is the eaves level. So that's why we had asked for some lessening of the bulk and mass in this area. And at page 226, you can see those amendments set out. If I take you through the plans, you can see the layout of the self-storage with the floor above and parking and a centrally located access here. 5 electric parking spaces of the 12 proposed. This is the residential layout. So a vehicular access here, blue badge, parking here. The applicant has indicated that this could be a electric charging space should members consider it necessary. In terms of the layout, we have either winter balconies or balconies to the front and also to the rear, and then a large area of residential communal space. These are the straight elevations of the proposed building. I'll also show some CGIs which help in terms of the visualization. And here the residential unit, light buff brick with a mansard roof above. Some sections across the site, and there'll be some more sections we have with distances included. These are the proposed boundary enclosures. In response to some of the concerns raised by objectors, the applicant has indicated that they'd be happy to provide taller forms of boundary enclosure up to 3.5 meters. So that is something that is available to be considered by members. The key issues are set out at page 251. I don't know, my CGIs have gone. The principle of development for a replacement commercial use is acceptable. In addition, the applicant has provided residential units as officers had expressed the desire for a mixed-use development and the provision of housing in this period of housing need would be a benefit. One point to draw members' attention to in the mod sheet is that there was a misunderstanding over the need to provide affordable housing commuted sums. Merton doesn't collect on schemes of 1 to 9 units. It's only of schemes of 10 and more, which is dealt with consistently across the borough. We had understood that this was being put in as a planning benefit. The applicant has since withdrawn this offer. Officers consider that is a correct approach. There is no requirement to provide affordable housing. Officers' view is that the proposal is acceptable as it stands without any kind of contribution for affordable housing. Moving on to the visual impacts at page 255. The proposed building is taller than the existing and would stand closer to the frontage of the site. However, as you can see, the building lines are consistent with those on the street. It's considered that the replacement building would not be visually harmful, and that's set out at paragraph 7.5 onwards. The residential building has a mansard roof, which is not particularly reflective of the area, but again would not appear visually intrusive or conspicuous. In terms of the impact on neighbouring amenity, that's page 258. The increase in height will have some minor impacts in terms of outlook and light, but you will see that the building is separated from the boundary somewhat more than the previous scheme. Sorry, not the previous scheme, than the previous building. As set out in the report, other planning issues are considered to be acceptable. Members will note the additional conditions set out in the mod sheet. Given that a number of concerns have been raised in relation to security, officers recommend a condition to secure details of CCTV and lighting. And again, this additional condition to secure a higher fencing should members consider necessary. It is of note that the applicant has increased electric charging to cover 5 of the 12 spaces. And as I mentioned, that blue badge residential space could be put forward as well. The recommendation is for approval subject to a legal agreement and conditions as set out at page 267 and the modification sheet. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Tim. We have 2 objectors to speak and the agent. Can I call in this order? Is it Abdul? You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Abdul Chowdhury. I live at number 45, and I represent my friend here and the residents of number 21 to 47. The overriding objective of today's discussion is for us not to be in a position where we are worse off compared to where we are now. That's what this is all about. We understand that we need a thriving community and we need a thriving business. So it's about finding a common goal. I refer to my email of yesterday where I highlighted 4 key concerns which I believe would need to be addressed. I understand that one of them may have been addressed, but critically, security is of paramount, because I walked around the subject property night before last, and what was very clear to me was I couldn't access my rear garden from there. Whereas if you look at the proposal, if you have a wall of, or even a boundary of 2.1 meters, very easily, and we all have very young families, and I cannot have young families in the back garden. My daughter's 5 years old, where you have a site which is open 24 hours a day. That's a major, major security risk. And that's a risk that we don't have at the moment. So I'd recommend that the proposal be revised and we have a permanent fixture which is at least 3.5 meters high. That's a critical point for us. Now, secondly, if you refer to the earlier drawings, what's very clear is that, particularly in our house, the neighboring houses, there is a loss of light. If you skim through the pages, you think actually there isn't, but there is. And we need to make sure that there is no loss of light. I recognize that the development and the owners have taken consideration of our concerns, and there has been some pushback in the first floor. But what we would propose is that there should be no loss of light. And the way to achieve that is to what you call maybe a hipping of the actual first floor. So the underlying site, and I understand the commercial viability of this, because they want to make sure they have maximized their the business rent. But if you hit that by a certain, maybe a few feet, you'll achieve that objective. And then sorry, just I got 1 minute. Loss of screening. Sorry, loss of screening. Now, what's apparent in some of the pictures is that there's this lovely green ivy, and this is the beautiful view that we have. And you heard from the previous case that we heard about the concerns that we have as a community, not just us, but in the neighborhood, of having greenery around us. Now, that's what we have at the moment. But what we'd have and what we'd be faced with is this big, massive, 4-meter high steelworks in front of us. And that's not very appealing as a community, let alone from an environmental perspective. And what we propose is that you are going to have screening. You have tall trees all the way across, not just, I think there are, tall trees on the left. As you look at the proposal from Daybrook Road, I think there are some tall trees towards the bottom end. We would prefer to have tall trees all the way across. And then lastly, apologies, noise. I understand there's a condition about noise, but there is going to be a significant amount of noise throughout the whole development.
Can I stop you there? But I think we take the point on noise. Thank you.
Okay.
Can I go to the next? Is it relevant to the? Yeah,
Yes,
Ed, go
Chair.
for it. Yeah.
So I just want, could we put up the ordnance survey? I know I asked for the speaker, maybe afterwards, just to highlight, maybe Tim, you could get it ready, just to show this gentleman's property, just so we can see.
That's a good point. I was going to, when Tim comes to remark back,
Yeah,
I was
sorry
going
to
to explore a
interrupt.
bit further some of the
Just so-
points raised, but good points. Thank you for that. Could I have, is it Ganesh? Yeah, thank you.
Can you hear me? Perfect. So further to my colleague, my neighbor here, Abul, right? So this is a representation from the houses from 21 to 47. So I think the key thing what he's mentioned is about loss of screening. Obviously, it's currently, we have at least 6 or 8 houses have got a green view across the houses. Obviously, that's a combination of maybe ivy, some of the trees behind. But obviously, what will be left out with, I don't know what is external surface of the building. It will be maybe cladding, or maybe aluminum, or some kind of, that yellow or whatever the color they're using. So we just want to be conscious about the fact that we'll be left out with this, not unpleasant views. And also some of the houses to the far right, which is 21 to 31, they have now an empty view, which they can see a modern hall park, right? So that will be now objected, obviously, with the residential block, which is like three blocks of that height as well. So that's also something to consider. So for that, that's what we're considering about, at least planting like a little bit taller trees. So at least they are all the way across the property. So at least we can have a little bit of pleasant view than just looking at this very tall building with poor external facing of the color and the materials they use. And again, other thing I want to talk about is the security. One of the point raised is about the height. Of course, we're not sure about how as it is 24/7 security, I'm sure I'll be expecting some lighting around the building, in the back of it, especially I'm not sure how they will be covering the lighting aspect of it because that will be facing our gardens. And also there will be CCTV cameras, of course, in view of GDPR. And of course, that is no for sure. But we just want to see how they will be addressed because it not be facing towards our gardens, but at least it should be facing to down, however the conditions are. And that is definitely a paramount condition for us in terms of security. That is actually the height of how far they can go. A solid wall rather than just a timber fence or something. So anyone can knock that easily. And yeah, those aspects I just wanted to consider about the CCTV, the lighting of the security aspects, and the green aspects of the things what we can. And also, of course, daylight, the light as well we just talked about. Definitely there is a loss of light, especially from 31. You can see the angle 18 degree angle. Definitely it will show the light loss of light as well. I think all the way from 31 to 45, reducing that. That's where we propose that they'll be considered as well. And noise pollution, again, we talked about not just about the construction, but also there is a question, I think, in the application itself that they have to consider that it has to be a certain level of decibels. I don't know what that number is. I think that's a condition, I believe, in the planning. And apart from that, obviously, as it's a 24/7 unit, we have air conditioning, vents, heat exchangers, and all this different sort. We need to be careful about how they will be in terms of the sound, or whether they'll be continuously on. Is there any venting left out to our gardens? Those kind of aspects, we just want to be considered. All in all, what we want to say is that we wanted to be respectful neighbors to the development. We just wanted to also consider, what actually the development is proposed and also how it will be beneficial for all of us. Thank you.
No, thank you very much for the constructive feedback you've both given tonight as well. Can I bring in the agent, Craig Slack?
Good evening, members. I'm Craig Slack from Pegasus Group, and I'm speaking in support of the application as planning consultant to the applicant, Attic Storage, who are the freehold owners of the site. Attic Self-Storage are an independent, award-winning self-storage space provider based in London. They have a strong track record of delivery and have built self-storage buildings in Beckton, Harrow, Marylebone over the last 3 years, and all within 18 months of being granted planning permission. So this is not a speculative proposal, but one that will be delivered. A careful balance of uses is sought for the site by the proposed development. The self-storage use respects the employment plan status of the site that is protected by your policy. And this is why the self-storage building and associated yard takes up the majority of the site. So the balance of the site is proposed for housing in response to pre-application advice from your officers who are seeking brownfield sites like this one to consider the potential to deliver new housing where possible. This importantly means that the site can make a contribution, albeit a small one, to your 5-year housing land supply. A design-led approach to the scheme has been prioritised from the outset, and several options for the layout have been considered by the architects. The one before you is the one that best protects amenity whilst meeting other council policy objectives for optimising brownfield land. The scale and density of the scheme is actually at a lower level than what your officers originally wanted to achieve at the site because of the need to ensure that neighbouring amenity is preserved. The uppermost story of the self-storage building has been amended during the application to be set back so that its ridge height now reflects that of the existing car garage and to ensure the properties at Daybrook Road experience no undue harm to their amenity. A new landscaping scheme is also proposed at the rear of the self-storage building to provide visual amenity for the Daybrook Road properties. This would be a mix of shrubs and small trees, as the narrow strip of land here prevents the planting and management of taller trees. And in response to the objectors' comments about security, obviously that's important to Attic, and officers are now recommending a condition for secured by design accreditation to be achieved, a lighting and CCTV scheme to be approved. And the other point about daylight and sunlight, a report was submitted with the application, which demonstrates how all standards have been met. And you'll all be aware of the unfortunate recent history of the site. Since the car sales garage closed, the site has been illegally trespassed twice. The first incident resulted in the placement of caravans on site and it being used as a commercial waste dump. A court order had to be obtained to remove the illegal trespassers. And after the first incident, Attic increased the amount of security, but the second trespassing was undertaken with people armed with knives. And numerous caravans were driven onto the site. The police were able to intervene this time and remove the trespassers. So the proposed development before you would bring back a permanent use to the site. And the building has been designed with security in mind, so it would prevent a similar type of trespassing from happening again. Overall, I hope you agree with your officers and consider the application to comply with your adopted development plan. Your approval of this application is respectfully requested. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Tim, if you can come back on some of those points, particularly be great, as Ed suggested, if we can pull up the map of the area, that would be quite useful. Yeah. And I mean, for me particularly, I know you know, there will likely now be a condition on 3.5 meters in terms of the fencing, but it'd be good to understand further the loss of light aspect and greening as well, if possible.
Thank you, Chair. If I just zoom in on this screen so you can see the position of neighbouring properties. So we have two sort of sets of relationship, if you like, at the rear, this here and this here. At the moment, the existing building extends down to here. So the properties in here would now actually have a view which they don't have currently. In terms of the specific relationships of those properties to the rear, if I could show you these drawings, which the applicant has superimposed a sort of a line of viewing in relation to the existing building, and has therefore sought to minimize the impact on these neighbors. I mean, again, it's but set further away, but is a relatively modest building in terms of what you might expect for redevelopment of the site. This is the area where the property that wouldn't have much of a view would now have a view. And this area shows the bit that officers have asked to be set back to try and minimize that impact on neighboring properties. So the blue was the originally proposed line. You can see the outline of the existing here. So the idea being that the point at which it clips the building is not vastly dissimilar to that as it is at the moment. And again, you can see that on a sort of a wider version of that section drawing there. Apologies, I did mean to show these in the presentation earlier. Here are the CGIs of the building, and again with the residential building on that side. Those are all the points I'd like to come back on, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tim. So we're going to open this up to questions, take it in rounds of 3. Who wants to go first? So we've got Susie, Ed, and Dan.
So a question for Tim. I was just thinking about what the back is going to look like with shrubs and small trees. Have you got a CGI of the back or any sort of imagery of what Daybrook Road is going to be looking at?
Ed?
Actually, I was going to ask the same. What was the height of the small trees? But actually, Tim, maybe you can just let us know about the new height of the fence, if there's any way you can just show roughly where that would be. We're up to 3.5 meters,
Yeah.
was it? Okay, thank you.
Cool. And Dan, go for it.
So ask on the EV charging, do we know if it's fast charging or what type of charging materials it is?
Thank you. So 2 on the rear in terms of shrubbery and height, and then about the charging capacity of the site itself.
Thank you, Chair. Bear with me. I'm going to try and put up a rear elevation. Okay, it is a more utilitarian view. This is the side, and this would be the rear. So brickwork at the lower floors, and then cladding, aluminium cladding places above. In terms, I don't have a CGI of the back, I'm afraid. If I take you to the section drawings to show the heights. The applicant has indicated that there's a potential for planting along here, that taller trees would not be possible along this section here. If I take you to the section drawings, I can show you roughly where the height of the fencing. Well, actually, you can see this measurement here is 4 meters, so 3.5 would be marginally under that. So we're looking at around this height here, if that helps. And then you can see the indicative landscaping that's in there in terms of the trees. So I guess the fence would be around this sort of height. And then, as I say, indicatively with those trees shown behind, that will be subject to a landscaping condition to fulfill that. Thank you, Chair. Oh, sorry, EV charging. The applicant at the moment puts forward 5 of the 12 spaces for the self-storage use, as electric parking has also agreed to provide one of the blue badge parking at the residential unit. There has been a question over whether these would be fast chargers or standard chargers. Now, there is some issue in terms of fast charging, that they have a much higher demand on power availability, and so it could require the provision of an additional substation if they were all to be fast chargers. However, the applicant, or the agent, has indicated willingness on this front, and subject to those investigations as to whether fast charging can be incorporated across the site, they are willing to look at improving that. It may be something you wish to leave with officers' best endeavours to achieve whatever is the most we can reasonably ask for in terms of fast charging. But that is something which can potentially be on the table, subject to those considerations. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Tim. Next round of questions. Cool. So, sorry, it's only for the committee, but I appreciate the points that you've made previously. Sorry, hands up again. So, Gail, Jill, I've got a question too. My question first is, if we, Tim, in your response, if you can pull up the drawing again where you're showing the height and the profile of the back. I noticed there was a step, and I'd like to understand the practicality of implanting or some other feature on that step that would be a visually pleasing. Like, has that been done in the borough before, or is it, is it a practical thing that is used to solve these type of challenges? So we've got, Jill, do you want to go next?
Yeah, on the subject of making that wall a little bit more pleasing, could I suggest potentially a living wall would be an option? I don't know how that all works, but it might overcome the issue of not being able to put giant trees, etc., etc. The second thing with regard to noise, these storage centres, I actually had one before it burnt down on Purley Way. In my experience, they tend not to be used that much at night, and I'm just wondering whether there is an overestimation of how much noise there would be out of hours, despite the fact that 24/7. And finally, could we really make sure that the disabled bay is an EV, please?
Very good point. And Kirsten, please.
Thanks. I have kind of 2 comments. I think the residents show interest in the fence being 3.5 meters. So it would be good if we, if they're interested. Having said that, then I don't know the impact on the sunlight, but because I don't know that height that's shown there at the angle. But anyways, and then Jill just mentioned that storage spaces do catch fire, and I notice interestingly that section 7.92 says a planning condition can be imposed requiring the development to be carried out in accordance with fire strategy statement. I would say we should, no, we may, isn't it? Yeah. more comment than question, but yeah.
I think it is a question, but it's a fair question too. Thank you. So recapping those, so concerns about fire safety, suggestions of a condition should not be mandatory given previous local fires in storages. Jill's excellent points about potential of a living wall, the reality about noise and noise studies based on other storage units, and sorry, what was the third point, Jill? Sorry, I missed that one. Easy to say, yes, of course, absolutely. The possibility of that, and my own point about putting up, that section drawing and just understanding what is practical in terms of greening on the rest of that back building.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the planting on the step and the roof, I have to say I don't know what the feasibility is because I don't know the type of construction and whether it could accommodate that additional weight and drainage. What I could suggest is that as part of the landscaping condition, officers investigate this as to whether there's opportunity for a planted roof, or even if it be individual planting positioned on the roof, but that can certainly be something we look at. Again, that can also cover the possibility of a green wall. I can't offer assurances that a green wall would be suitable or could be carried out, but we can certainly use officers' best endeavours to identify whether that would be possible, and certainly look to facilitate it if at all, if it is at all possible. In terms of noise, we do have conditions limiting noise. Again, a provision of a high fence is likely to assist in terms of noise attenuation as well. So that may have some additional benefits which aren't yet realised in the application. In terms of fire safety, it would need to be done in line with that fire statement, and they'd need to do that in order to gain building regs. If members felt appropriate, we can put a condition on to say it must be done in accordance with this fire strategy as an extra level of certainty, and that would be my suggestion as to how to deal with that. Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, Tim, would you mind just recapping that last point? I was noting your previous point as well.
Yes, absolutely. So in terms of the fire strategy statement, the proposal would be built out in accordance with that, but as an additional level of certainty for the committee, we can add a condition to say the development to be carried out with the fire strategy submitted.
Super. Next round. I think Sherry Ann wanted to ask a question before. Anyone else? No? Ed, do you want to come on this at all in a minute? Do you want to speak on this at all? Cool. All right. And we'll bring Susie back in.
Sorry, me first. It was just about the green wall. If a green wall is possible, can we also condition its maintenance so it continues to be a green wall?
And Sherry Ann, go.
Hello. Sorry, can I just clarify? Earlier, I really wasn't sure. If the applicant is willing to go up to 3.5 meters of sort of a permanent fixture to reduce the impact and to improve security, I heard that earlier in your speech, but I just wanted to confirm. Sorry.
Thank you. So it's reconfirming what the art of the possible is in terms of security and the height of the wall, and in terms of provision for maintenance of green infrastructure. What's the best practice in the area?
Thank you, Chair. Generally speaking, landscaping conditions are limited to a 5-year period where we can insist that be carried through. Beyond that, it's generally considered unreasonable to insist that landscaping be maintained. Usually by that point it's established in any event. But we can certainly, that 5 years will be part of any landscaping condition, and maintenance for that 5 years will certainly be part and parcel of that condition. Sorry, I've missed the other point actually. Yes, height of the wall.
Yeah.
So 3.5 meters. If I show you on a plan which shows the proposed boundary enclosures, so you can see the blue is an existing brick wall which is 3.6 meters. The green is a close board timber fence of 2.1 meters. So it's these areas here which could be reinstated as a higher form of enclosure up to 3.5 meters, which would assist with security from the alley. So these are the 3 new buildings with the projecting brickwork that you saw in the picture, and the access in here. And this is the rear of gardens here. So there is this access way in here. This is gated, but still some potential access. It's across here that the public speaker was talking about those potential accesses into the site. So it would be these areas which could be conditioned to be higher. Probably not so needed on the residential element, because it would be next to other residential uses. But yes, certainly that green area, we can look at that being higher. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. One final round. Just want to come back on the residential side. Sorry, just thinking about putting myself in those resident shoes, and with residents here as well. Those live in the wall basically facing in towards the site itself. Wouldn't that have the same preconditions as what we've just heard today? Would it, what has there been any discussions or feasibility about making that higher? But then again, what's the trade-off in my mind that then reduces light as well for those people, that garden? So it'd be good just to understand, do we have a view on that, or any imaging that would help with that decision as condition? And Kirsten, you had a question as well.
Thank you. I'm just sorry, because I don't completely understand the kind of the design of the storage. I'm assuming there's no windows overlooking into the properties, right? Just confirm. And then with the noise levels, I noticed that obviously it says the report that there's currently no acoustic report, but that will be submitted, and I'm assuming that there's reassurance that that will actually happen. Thank you.
Cool. So on noise report, anything else? Any further questions? No. So just my point, and the noise, just confirming about noise reporting, about that wall, that for the residential block.
Yes, bear with me for a moment, Chair. I'm just going to check which. Thank you. Yes, so we have the noise impacts controlled by condition down to decibel ratings. So that would be an enforceable condition to impose. Yes, there's no windows, so no outlook to the rear here or to the north there. In terms of whether the wall would block light, in my opinion, it wouldn't, because I mean, if you look at here, sunlight, I mean, rises in the east and sets here. So the only potential direction in which light could be blocked would be from the direct east. The wall would be here, so there wouldn't really be an opportunity for light to come in below that anyway. So I don't think there would be an issue in terms of increased blocking of light. We do also have the road along the side, but that is all the existing building goes up to there at the moment, which is higher than that in any event. So there's not going to be any increased impact if we were to have a higher fence along this side.
Can we, so sorry, thank you for that. Just going back on that last point, because this is the view from the back, I was referring to the residential side for the new block. So the side that goes into the actual site itself. Because if we're talking about security for residents, they're new residents on the site as well. So it was just understanding the impact of light if that were to increase, or if there was a provision to increase it, because a lot of the time, this is a risk that we've heard tonight. We don't know if the risk will be borne out. Is there a possibility to give the provision? It may be built to 2.5, but it's enabling the provision to happen for security of the new residents as well as the existing residents.
Thank you, Chair. We can look at a higher form of enclosure to this internal fence as well, so that these new residents would be secure from the site in the same way that these other residents are. There's no real views this way which are reliant on light coming in. It's also the north, so it's mainly going to be to the rear and the front that the main light sources would be. So I don't think there'd be an issue in terms of light, again, even to the garden area, because it's to the north, it wouldn't overshadow.
Super, thank you. Last question, then we'll go comments.
Thank you, Chair. It's a very, very small thing. I'm just looking at that enormous wall going all the way around the site and thinking about the fact that it backs onto gardens from Daybrook Road and wondering if you could have some hedgehog tunnels in it.
Fair question.
Thank you.
I think it's more of a condition, rather more of a comment slash condition. All right, let's spill over then into comments.
I think it ranks with Swift
Yeah,
as an informative.
Swifts and comment and Swifts and hedgehogs. All right, that's a comment. Any further comments? Ed, do you want to say anything as in your patch at all?
Thank you, Chair. No, I'm quite pleased. Obviously, I know it's in my ward, and Daybrook Road, and I know has a very active WhatsApp group, and many of the residents come to our monthly meetings, and I know that I welcome the fact that they've been liaising with the applicants here, and some adjustments have been made, and clearly there are some further adjustments being made in terms of security of the fencing. So I think that's a very good thing. We all know a development is going to happen, and I think this site laying empty has been quite a problem with the travellers, and more recently with the security being forced off with the threat of knives is obviously very concerning. So I think it's the scheme. I'm glad that they've liaised with the residents. Really, I wish more people would do that. It might save a lot of time. So it seems like a lot of say objections, but a lot of concerns of the residents have been taken into account, and they've done quite a bit to try and assure those residents. So no, I'm quite pleased.
No, fantastic. No, I echo that. Any further comments before we Jill and Michael?
Just only echo really what Councillor Foley said. I think the fact that they have engaged so carefully with the residents is very encouraging and should be seen as a great example to anyone watching, future developers. And I'm happy that if we can place these conditions on that we've discussed, I see no reason that, everyone should live very peaceably together. And I hope that it's a successful development, and I will definitely be voting yes on it.
Thank you. Michael?
Yeah, pretty much echoing what everyone said. If we can lock in these conditions, I'm very happy with the development. And can I second Councillor Hicks's point on the hedgehogs, please?
Hedgehogs.
Thank you very much.
Good point. Any further comments before we go conditions? All right, so if I forget one, hands up, shout out. So from my list here, we've got electric charging of the blue badge spot. That's the standard electric charger because it's residential use. Generally across the site, we want 100% electric charging with fast charging where it doesn't have a beyond a reasonable detrimental impact to the network. So that's the wider point about, do we need a new transmission hub for that? So we heard a lot today about security and the options for security. And we've already heard that the standard's going to be increased. So we want to obviously increase the height of the fence to 3.5 in our conditions. We've heard a lot about greening and how do you make that back more pleasant to look at. And so as part of the landscaping, we would want to include the best endeavours on a green wall and a green, the space between the first and second levels, that tiered bit, where possible to make that green. Maybe they combine the two and make that a green wall feature. So as residents aren't looking at something which is effectively, a building. And we've already heard the challenges of maintenance, but there's a 5-year period in that. We've already heard concerns about the fire strategy, but had also reassurances about building control. But we want to bring that out with an additional condition. So we've just got that locked in and firmed. And finally, the hedgehogs and swift boxes. Ed, I missed something.
Just, thank you, Chair. Just one thing, the roof blocking the light, is there any option to adjust that anymore at all?
That may be changing the plan a bit more. Can I just confer with officers?
Chairman, I totally understand the point that we've had extensive negotiations. I think we've reached the point where the applicant wants us to decide on the plans before us.
Okay, that's fair enough. Yeah, cool. All right. Any further conditions? Anything that I've missed? Super. Okay. So that's the scheme we're going to be voting on now. So can I get those hands against the scheme as it is on order? No? All those not voting?
Chairman.
All those voting in favour?
Unanimous, Chairman.
Thank you very much, and thank you everyone for coming. So we'll move on to our next item of business. So that is, it's a discharge of duty related to the Eddie Katz site, and John is going to present this to us. Sherry?
Just to ask, are we not having item 7, the building control update on the Galpins Road incident?
That's going to be, sorry, afterwards. Yeah.
Thank you for clarifying.
So just to clarify, because I know colleagues may have different types of agendas, so, and apologies, it's my fault for going back on what I said in terms of the order. So obviously we've done this application here. We're going to pull up the Clarion Eddie Katz, so that's discharge of conditions, and then we're going to go back to item 8, which is development maintenance related to Galpins Road. Item 7, which is Benedict's Courtyard, that was that was pulled by my asking. So why don't we take just a very, very brief recess until 10:05, and then we'll come back. Okay. Thank you very much.